So we've spent a lot of time exploring where do we want to go? What is the direction that we want to head in? Motivation and goal is another way of looking at the same thing. Um, and we've looked a little bit at the principles that, and again, often that's the same thing actually in another guise. Qualities that we want to develop maybe relate to principles that we want to follow, and our goal may be to manifest more of those qualities. And that's a lot of what's come up in the discussion, that there are certain qualities, compassion, concentration, wisdom, courage, commitment, kindness, discipline, and so on. We want to develop those qualities. So traditionally, the Buddhist path does tend to put forward some kind of goal of enlightenment or nirvana. And then, of course, some of the other higher teachings saying, well, it's not really a goal. It's not, enlightenment isn't really something that you attain. But at the same time, a lot of the time, that is the talk, actually. There's some sense in which that is understood to be, on a straightforward level, it is some kind of a goal, but it can be misleading if we make that too concrete. It's really what's being said. But the point that I wanted to emphasize at the beginning is the point made so beautifully by the little boy in the video. And that's why, we talk in Buddhism, we talk about practice. That practice is the way. Why do I want to, make such a point about this? In a way, it's very obvious. Because, and I think I've said, said things on this same lines before, we have a very strong tendency to doubt our ability to reach that goal, whether we think of it in terms of enlightenment, Buddhahood, nirvana, or whether we just think of it in terms of an image that we have of those spiritual qualities that we would wish to manifest more than we do. Maybe, as we looked at during the week, someone who is an inspiring example of compassion or wisdom or one of these qualities. And we have a strong tendency to doubt. I have a strong tendency to think, well, I will never be like that. I will never be able to do. I might improve a little bit. And the answer is right there in that short video. We can if we practice. And if we practice consistently. And if we practice consistently for a long time. When I say a long time, it's interesting, what is a long time? You might think 5 years is a long time. But if you practice something for 5 years, first of all, you will get pretty good at it if you practice consistently. Secondly, at the end of the 5 years, it won't seem like a long time. It seems like a long time at the start. We're impatient. We want to get there quick. And the Dalai Lama emphasizes, many, many times, that's not realistic. That's not how it works. So, my encouragement to you is, believe that you can. because that belief is very important for the motivation. If we set out along in a direction, towards a goal, but we don't really think that we have the ability to make it, it's very unlikely that we'll make the best possible progress. If we have strong confidence that that goal is attainable, that we can manifest authentic compassion or deep wisdom, because a lot of people have doubt about that. Well, yes, I can, the compassion bit I can do, but the wisdom, that's very difficult. It's not for me. Or, maybe next life or the life after that. So our motivation will not be very strong if we don't have that belief. So we looked at last week, in traditional Buddhist language, we're talking about refuge. What are the things that I come back to, rely on, whether it be a set of principles or qualities, or an individual, someone who's a particularly clear, good example of the direction I want to go in. Or, no, I didn't mention this, and I did mean to mention it, and I apologize. It's another element there is, a regret that I didn't put this in, but it's quite important. Groups of people, not single individuals is very important, that we see as our role model, our kind of shining light example, somebody want to follow. It's a Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, whoever it is. But also, and on a less exalted level, perhaps, groups that we can become part of, or groups of friends, that share the same outlook, that we can support one another. So I encourage you also to have a look and see, where in your life do those groups exist that you feel a strong sense of common purpose, common outlook, shared understanding. So this is obviously the Sangha, yes, in terms of the traditional concept of refuge. And it was defined by somebody as the company of like-minded people. Very simple, isn't it? So these things we need as our support. And if we have a strong grounding in these principles, spiritual principles that we've spoken about and we've explored, then that can really, be a tremendous asset in our life, a very powerful resource in terms of taking us where we want to go, overcoming the problems that we struggle with, internal and external problems will gradually come under control as we follow through this path. And one of the most fundamental elements in that is having this strength of conviction. So this is why I've spent quite a long time with you exploring in different ways to try to get very clear for each of you, what are those principles and guidelines and those motivations and those qualities that define what is my direction that I want to go in my path in life. We talk about a spiritual path, as I say. I think that it can be slightly misleading in the sense that it's easy to sort of have an idea of what's spiritual and what isn't, that excludes certain things and includes certain things. And that may not be the essence of the matter. The essence of the matter is what is really fundamentally, enduringly important for you. So as I mentioned, for some people, it can be to do with an artistic expression like music or poetry or literature. And that can be fundamentally important part of their path. In traditional Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, those things are not so recognized as, really spiritual. And of course, they can be practiced in a way that isn't particularly spiritual, but they also can be, very, very key parts of a spiritual path. So I want to encourage you to, have this kind of independent thinking and self-examination, to honestly look at what's really important for me. I might be fooling myself that these Buddhist terms that I use, habitually now, if I've been studying Buddhism for a bit, I might be fooling myself that those are really the most important things for me, genuinely. I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying, maybe if you ask your question in that spirit, let's open the box and really check it out and find out. Does this align with who I am? But nevertheless, out of those conversations, I think we've got quite a clear sense that when we do this, engage in this inquiry seriously, we tend to come up with certain things that are pretty universal, that will serve us as principles, whoever we are, to live our life by. I know we've obviously got a pre-selected group here. Tends to be, of course, because it's German Buddhist Center Leads, it tends to be people who already have a certain commitment to particular form of Buddhism, obviously. So that may have had an influence. But nevertheless, I think the ones that we've come up with, they are universal in the sense that those are some of the principles that really do, when we put them into practice, they have the ability to create a life that is truly fulfilling and worthwhile. This is the point. This is the reason. So authenticity is very important, that we, as I said, we check in with ourselves and look at, okay, is this, what I'm manifesting in my life, how I'm living my life, does that align with the truth of who I am and what's important to me, what's meaningful to me? Compassion. So we exist in an interdependent relationship with everybody. And I'm going to speak a lot about that in the second half of the course. And therefore, to cut myself off and just look at, well, how can I get what I want from life? This is really cutting myself off from the richest and largest source of fulfillment and satisfaction of a genuine kind. Connection was spoken about, or I spoke about connection. And obviously connection and compassion are very connected. So it's not just a case of understanding as a fact that someone's experiencing suffering and thinking that's a shame, what can I do to help? But really developing an awareness of that other person's experience, what it is, entering into that in some way, so that we see it, as Karthik said, from their point of view, then we may have a genuine ability to help. If we don't have that that type of awareness, I think the word empathy, originally, I think it kind of did tend to mean that, but it's got, I think it seems to have taken on a slightly different meaning, that it tends to mean just feeling sorry for somebody. And that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having an insight. And insight is one of the words connected with the wisdom side of the path. So not an intellectual knowing. We can say a knowing from the heart, but a knowing, not just a feeling, just a, sometimes the feelings don't, feeling sorry doesn't help. It's a famous saying, isn't it? Feeling sorry doesn't help. But genuine compassion does help. And again, that's obviously going to be a big part of the second half of the course. So this is what we will be looking at the next 6 weeks. Discipline has been mentioned, and that is something I will be talking about. And it's related to concentration, again, and commitment, which Laura mentioned. Without those, our progress will be slow. So the commitment comes from, as I said, the clarity, first of all, of what the goal is, what the principles are, the guidelines, the examples that we want to follow, and the conviction that we can create the result. And that comes from experience, from practice. But, as I say at the start, it's so helpful to recognize that it's true for everyone, that results don't come very quickly on this kind of practice, this kind of path. But they do come if you practice consistently. Therefore, there's no reason for the self-doubt. The self-doubt is an illusion, it's a mistake. We all have the potential, and that means we can develop those qualities. So then, from that conviction comes the commitment. Clarity and conviction leads to commitment, which leads to discipline. If we have commitment, then although we will keep tripping up, we keep falling over. So a certain Zen master who defined the path of Zen as one continuous mistake. Very good, very accurate. We learn by getting it wrong. So we get it wrong in one way, and then we get it wrong the same way again. And maybe we do that a third time, but then maybe that we don't do it a fourth time. Yeah. So we can get disheartened because we think, I keep making the same mistakes. And I've been practicing visualization for 10 years and I still can't visualize very well. And we think, I'm never going to get there, I might as well give up. This is the biggest mistake. So, so commitment then creates discipline, and it comes from conviction and clarity. Got a lot of C's here. And then out of that commitment and that discipline comes concentration. Very important. And that's one of the things I think that people tend to despair about. I've been practicing meditation for 10 years and I still have so little concentration. Okay. Do you have a little bit more than when you started? Just a little bit more. Answer almost certainly yes, if you've been doing any serious practice at all. Now, the thing about concentration is the more concentration you have, the quicker your progress. So if you stay with it and consistently keep to your practice, then it will speed up. It doesn't slow down, it speeds up. So I'm saying a lot here to encourage you because I see, that people do get disheartened or lose heart or rest content, satisfy themselves with a fairly mediocre level because that's what they think they're capable of. And you're all capable of much more. So I think that's probably enough for now about, so what we've been talking about, in case you want the decoding here, we've been talking about the second two noble truths, okay? The goal of the path and the nature of the path, the practice that makes the path. So just say one word about that before I finish, that this very grandiose word nirvana, is used for the goal of the third noble truth. Actually, the word, strictly speaking, in the original, Buddhist sutra is nirodha, which means cessation. And it means the cessation of suffering. But again, suffering, the original Sanskrit or Pali word dukkha, has also been translated as unsatisfactoriness, right? So what we've been looking at over the last few weeks is what is unsatisfactory? What is not exactly how I want it to be in my life? Okay. That's dukkha. Whatever in my life isn't how I want it to be, then that's something that I want to change, that I want to be free from, that I want to stop. So cessation is when those things that are our dissatisfaction of our life, when they are no longer present, when our life is as we want it to be, then we reached our goal. Of course, we can continue in the same direction. So we could say, as long as we haven't got the most deepest level of fulfillment and satisfaction in our life that we can possibly have, then we still got somewhere to go. And what is it that gets us there? Well, that's the principles of the path. So the three traditional principles have been mentioned. We've come up with our own set. I think they're just as good. Connection, courage, compassion, concentration, commitment, and wisdom, including curiosity. So, of course, all of those, there are others that connect and that are part of those. There are many more, we could expand that and bring many more words, many more principles. But I think that's a good set, and we're going to explore work with those. They're close enough to the traditional ones anyway, but I think it's important, it's significant that these are your own, these are what you've come up with, and we'll see where that takes us. So we're going to come back and have a bit more discussion now, just briefly.